Okay, so my name is Keithen Hayenga. I'm a developer relations engineer here at Marmalade, and I'm going to be talking about developing for the BlackBerry 10 using Marmalade Quick, our Lua-based development environment. One of the first things I actually want to talk about is that we have a special offer with BlackBerry, and that's part of why we're doing the webinar today, is we're kicking off the offer, and then we want the webinar to help us get started with the process. So the first thing about our offer is there are actually two parts to it. First of all, we will actually extend the SDK license, the indie version, so that you can actually do development for the BlackBerry. And then the second part of this is we will also be giving away BlackBerry Z10s. Being from an English company, I still have to say Z10, I guess, even though I'm still in America. But the idea is we have 10 BlackBerry Z10s that we will be having a drawing for. And let's sort of talk about how that's going to work. So first of all, we need you to start with the Marmalade SDK. And so we have an evaluation version that you can start with. And that's good for 30 days. And what we need you to do is, if you don't already have a license, we need you to be able to try to start developing in those 30 days and get something working with Marmalade for BlackBerry 10 that is at least sort of a beta quality. And what you do then is, at that point, you submit your draft application to be evaluated, and we need the BlackBerry World Vendor ID to do this, and we'll go ahead and submit that to the store. And that way they can determine that you are using the Marmalade SDK and that you qualify for the offer. And if that happens, BlackBerry lets us know, and we go ahead and extend the actual license. And so we give you an indie license, which is good for developing on iOS, Android, Windows Phone 8, and of course, BlackBerry 10. And so we'll give you that license for a year at no payment for you to go ahead and finish off your development of your actual BlackBerry 10 application. And then, once you've actually gotten your application into the store, you've finished it, we'll actually be doing a draw. So we have you register at madewithmarmalade.com on our BlackBerry page, and then so you can actually have with the draft or the full version working by the end of July. We'll go ahead and put you into the drawing, and there is only one entry per developer. It doesn't matter how many apps you submit, just one entry into the drawing. And we've actually had previous BlackBerry promotions where people have already gotten BlackBerry phones. And one of the things we want to do is give as many people as possible the chance to use a BlackBerry 10 and make apps for it. So if you've already gotten a BlackBerry through one of our previous promotions, then you won't be qualified for this. This is mainly for the new people. And this is an offer that for the BlackBerry drawing will end on July 31st, right at midnight Eastern Standard Time. And every qualified developer will be entered in the drawing to win one of the 10 devices. And what we'll do is we'll then have the drawing, and we'll notify the winners by August 5th. And we'll send that to the email address that you signed up with when you signed in on the Marmalade, Made with Marmalade BlackBerry page. And then if you have to pay taxes on getting a free device, you're responsible for the taxes. No cash alternative. It's the device. That's what we want you to have. And Marmalade's decision is final. And let's see. And after we go ahead and notify you, you've got 7 days to respond. And if you don't respond, we'll move down to another participant farther down the list. So that's the special offer that we've got going. Let's see. One of the other things I really should mention just as a beginning is that we are able to take your questions at any time. So if we get questions, go ahead and we'll ask. We'll try to handle them interactively right as we're going along. I heard people out in the other room, so I just closed my door to get a little more privacy here. Okay, so let's talk about what we're going to be presenting today. So we're going to talk a little bit about Marmalade. We're going to talk a little bit about Quick, especially. We might have to go over the installation instructions. We had that on a video at one point, but I wasn't able to find it, so I'm going to recap the installation instructions. I'll probably do that relatively quickly. We'll talk about documentation a little bit, but mostly what we want to do is actually get into doing some quick development and actually see some development happening. And one of the other things to mention is that we have just released our SDK 6.3.1. And why that's really important for Quick is that we've added a new debugger from Zero Brain for debugging Quick that's really nice and slick. So we'll be talking about that today. And then we'll go on and give everyone another chance at doing Q&A. So let's go ahead and talk some more about Marmalade specifically. So Marmalade lets us do lots and lots of applications. We can develop both applications and games. It turns out because of user interface issues, most of what our developers do are games, because games be the same UI cross-platform, and it's a lot easier. So about 80% of our of the products made with Marmalade are games. We have, let's see, what's working here. We have a number of platforms that we develop for, and we're really, really very flexible. We can develop for iOS or Mac OS desktop. We can develop for Windows desktop or Windows Phone 8. We can also work with LG smart televisions or Roku devices. And of course, one of the other big ones we work for is with Android devices, tablets, and phones. But the last one that I've left here is BlackBerry. We developed for BlackBerry, the previous version of BlackBerry OS, but we also developed for BlackBerry 10, and that's what we're going to be talking about today. The way that we normally develop with Marmalade, our cross-platform environment, is we actually have a number of different languages that we let you work in. Our main framework is actually done in C++, and the usual thing is we would compile your binary, and we would then load your binary, which is the application, along with platform-specific code that we call our OS abstraction layer, or our loader. And together with that, we actually make it into a package that runs on the various devices. So it'll be an APK on Android. It'll be a BAR file on BlackBerry. We also have a version of Marmalade called Web Marmalade, where we can use HTML5, CSS, and our web features. And it's compatible with PhoneGap at the 1.7 level, and you can actually use the JavaScript to develop for cross-platform environments. And one of the neat things about our Web Marmalade is that you can then call into the C++ routines that we have and make a hybrid app if you need to do that for performance. And then the other language that we really stress is Lua. And so Lua is a scripting language that is really fast at developing graphics. And that's the language that we use in our Quick version of Marmalade. In all of our versions of our development environments, we have the idea of a one-click deploy, where you go ahead and develop your application and you work on it, and you can develop on the desktop. We were talking about debugging on the desktop. And one of the important things that we do for development is we normally work with the development environment that you're used to. So if you work on Windows, we normally launch you in Visual Studio, and if you're on Mac, we launch you in Xcode. And so you can actually develop for the desktop, which makes it very easy to do your debugging, because you can work in x86 code and use the native Visual Studio's debugger or the Xcode debugger with nothing special to do to get it working. And once you've got your application working, we then go ahead and we will deploy it. And so that will build for your ARM version and package it up for the device. And that's where we do our one-click install, where we take that binary and package it up into sources that are good, or into a package that's good enough to add directly to the store. Okay, so let's talk more about Quick specifically. So the idea behind Quick is that it's used for 2D development. Let's see. And there's a number of reasons that we like Quick. So it's very good at rapid development. That's its forte. Now C++, because it runs native, is very, very fast, but it's harder to, or slower to write. And that's where Lua really stands the test of time, is that lets you really quickly get into doing graphics. And there are people that don't want to learn C++, so the learning Lua is a little bit quicker to do. A lot of things are done for you that you don't have to worry about. And want to also mention that we've also got some special tools. This is a comparison against other versions where you don't get access to your sources of your tools, and they're not extensible, or they're only iOS or Android only, or they lack support, or you have to do the building on a cloud-based version. So it turns out we think we address that. So Marmalade itself is built on the Lua language, but it also uses some libraries that are really key to what we're doing. We use Cocos 2D, which is why we've got the 2D. That's why we build for 2Ds, because we're using Cocos 2D, and we also have Box 2D, which works very well with that, which does the physics for that. And so that's pretty much the heart and soul of what our Lua script is driving around to do our 2D graphics. And we do it with a lot less code. You'll see when we're doing scripts, the scripts are very short, very easy to develop. As we've talked about, you don't have to know C++. And one of the really important things about our version is that we have made it open source, and so it is extensible. So we're sort of proud of how we do that. And when we let you write your apps in Lua, it's the fastest scripting language that we know of for graphics, and it's simple and powerful. We've already mentioned it uses popular frameworks like the Cocos 2D, and we also have our technology that is working for our C++ and Web Marmalade working on Windows and Macintosh. We've taken that foundation across to use with Quick, so it's very robust. That works fairly easily and very solidly. We give you a nice GUI project management with our Launchpad, and new for 6.3.1, a full IDE for debugging that we'd already mentioned. The way that Quick works is that you code all of your actual gameplay in Lua. You don't have to write any other language or that. It works by itself. But Quick does have bindings to the C++ implementation. So we've got the libraries, for instance, underneath the Cocos 2D and stuff like that are C++. So we do the bindings, we provide the bindings for that. So while you're writing in Lua, you are actually activating native code that runs very fast. The precompiled Marmalade C++ app implements all of the performance critical engine parts, and it provides those bindings and executes your Lua script rapidly. And the Lua script actually runs, our interpreter is actually a C version, so the interpreter itself runs very fast. We've got a nice execution environment. So let's say we've sold you on the idea of using Quick. So let's talk about how you actually get it on your machine. The first thing that you actually need to have is the Marmalade SDK. And so we'll go on to our website, And I'm using a Macintosh right now, so we're going to get the Macintosh release. We of course have the PC release to do. So we'll download that, and after we let's see and talk about this a little bit. So we'll download our SDK, and when you then unzip the SDK on a Macintosh, you get an image which you can then click, which is the image for an installer. So on both Windows and Mac, we have an installer that when we unzip, that's what you have, and you just double-click the installer, and it's just like installing any other application. You just follow through and go ahead and install it. I'm going to step off here for just a moment, and let's go out to the Finder, and I'll tell you where we actually put this. So on the Macintosh, the normal place is in /developer Marmalade, and we'll have 6.3. So this is what I will install with the installer, and that will be the same on Windows. On Windows, you'll be in C:/Marmalade 6.3. So Marmalade 6.3 will be at the top level on Windows also. Let's get back to this and say, now that we've installed the regular SDK, we have to add quick to it. Okay, so I want to tell you one more thing before we go there. Let's go over here back to our image. So when we install the SDK, we'll have all of this stuff inside. We'll have the web part, which is, so Web Marmalade comes as the normal SDK. This quick portion that I've got here will not be part of the SDK. That we have to add separately. So that's what I was leading up to with this next part. So what we'll do is on our website, we'll go ahead and under the Marmalade SDK, we'll go into the Marmalade Quick page, which will then again have us do downloading, and I will again download for the Macintosh. Again, we will unzip that. You'll do likewise for Windows and unzip what you've got. Now, one of the reasons I wanted to do the Macintosh version is the Macintosh version is a little bit more involved. So what we actually do is when you unzip the package that we've downloaded, it has a number of files. And so all you do is take the files and drag them over here. You notice this would be within the 6.3, the Marmalade 6.3 folder. You just drag them over and drop them in the same location. Now what's going to happen is you're going to have to, first of all, authenticate, which just means go ahead and type in your password to let it know that, yes, you want to add this to that level. And here's the important part on the Macintosh. We're going to merge the files that we just dragged with what's already there. So we're going to say merge and apply to all. So we want to do both of those things. And once we do it, we will wind up with this added and the extra applications, including our quick launch pad. So that's how we add them for the Mac. Let's go. Oh, I just put something while I was doing that. Let's talk about what happens on Windows. On Windows, what you actually have instead of the individual folders is an actual installer again. So on Windows, you just go ahead and click the installer, and the installer will unzip those files and put them directly in the correct locations. So Windows is actually easier to get quick installed on. Now, we also want to talk about adding BlackBerry resources. So we have a BlackBerry representative with us, but I'm going to kind of talk about what we have to do, and we'll see if he needs to correct me or something. So the idea that I have back here is let's see, I didn't want to do this yet. not sure what I'm doing there. Go away. Okay. Oh, okay. So I accidentally clicked on it when I was zipping by. So the important thing that I wanted to do is talk about certification. So there are two things that I've actually downloaded for BlackBerry. So I do have the BlackBerry SDK downloaded, so I can actually communicate with my BlackBerry Z10. The other thing that we need to do is we actually have to get some certification stuff. And so you sign up through the BlackBerry website. And what you actually get is a certificate, and then you then have to create your own keys. So the instructions for doing that are on the website, and I apologize I didn't go get them. I was thinking that we would have that provided, but the important thing is the instructions are on the BlackBerry site. You will go ahead and take the when you register, they will then send you your main token that you will use to generate your keys. And when you generate the keys, you will then have to put them in a particular location so they can be found by the BlackBerry software when it's going to communicate with the BlackBerry device. And so on Windows, you will actually put it in your local settings, applications data, and you'll have a folder for research in motion, and you'll put your keys there. And on the Mac, we'll actually create a research in motion folder in the library directory. So let me show you what we've got there. So let me go back to my top level. Come on. Okay. So what we have here is in the library world, we now have a research in motion directory I've created. And in here, we've got three separate things. We have our author ID, our P12 thing, and then we have a bar signer CSK and a bar signer DB. And these are the things that we'll actually create with the token that BlackBerry sends to us, and we'll put them in the proper location so that our drivers can access them to know that it's valid to communicate with our devices. Okay, let's go back to...
I just wanted to quickly note before moving ahead. So basically, the signing keys are like your identity. It's like your passport. So yeah, it's very important to keep them safe.
Yeah, just one moment. I wanted to let you guys know that the person that's now speaking is Ram from BlackBerry. So this is good advice from him. Go ahead.
Right. Yeah. Thanks, Keithen. So yeah, by the way, my name is Ram, and I'm a gaming consultant at the BlackBerry. So just basically help game developers like you yourself to bring games over to BlackBerry and help you be successful ultimately. So yeah, coming back to the just the tip is that the process is you fill up the form in the website, and then once you fill up the form, BlackBerry will email you 2 files, and those 2 files will be in 2 different emails. And with those emails, as Keithen mentioned, you can generate your signing keys. And once you generate those signing keys, it's very important to keep those 3, because you need those 3 files to actually publish or upgrade your app in the future. If you lose them, it's very, very hard for us to identify that you are the actual owner of the app. So it's been what do you call? We have been working on making sure that this whole process itself is simplified. But for now, it's very important to keep them safe. So I highly recommend, once you generate the keys, zip it and, I don't know, email yourself in like a safe place, or put it in a safe place wherein you can retrieve. And also another use is that if you have, let's say, 4 or 5 people in team, and you want to work on different machines, you can actually give these signing keys to different machines, and all your developers can actually build and sign and deploy onto the device. So that's not another good use of the signing keys itself. So yeah, that's the small tip that I just want to give before going out of the signing key. Yeah.
Okay. Okay, so let's go ahead and assume that we've got our keys and we're ready to do development. So let's find out some more about how we actually do the development. So the next thing we do is talk about where we get documentation. Well, let's see, we just talked about that. So in documentation, we've got a couple of different places to go. The first place is to just find about Lua. Lua.org is the official site of the Lua language, of the scripting language. And it has links to their own documentation. And so this is the documentation that actually talks about the language itself and the language specifics. And so it's a good way to kind of learn the specifics. It turns out, if we're actually starting out to develop, I think a quicker place to go is our own quick documentation. And so we have our own documentation, which I think is a really good starting point. Let me actually zip off to the site. Let's see. So I want to go to quick, and in the Marmalade quick area, we have documentation. So this is the link that I used to get there. And so this will come up on the web page I was just talking about. Now, the important thing that when we're talking about, we've actually got some tutorials. So we've got some basic guides that talk about how to get everything started. So this is really, so if I leave things unsaid or not working, this is, I think, the best place to go and kind of follow through to really learn what's going on. So this is our basic descriptions that we start out with. And after we've done that, one of the other parts that I think is really important, let me go back to the top level, and that's the API reference. When we're actually talking about items in our programming, we'll find out that there are some libraries that we've got that we share. But here's what I think is more important, is the objects. So Lua is an object-oriented scripting language, and there are a number of things that are really, really important. So scenes are actually the background, so that'll be the page that we talk about. Sprites are images that we can then move about on the screen, so they're relatively easy to use graphics things. Labels are just text, and we've got actual animation routines. So I told you that Lua is a very powerful language. So as part of the language, you can do tweening and stuff like that. So it can actually move images around and modify them as part of the movement, and that's just built into the language. So so we've got a number of things like that that we use as objects. And let's go back here to the events. So we're also event-driven, and there are two types of events that you can have with Lua. You can actually have system-wide events where you go ahead and register callbacks, and everyone, when those events like touch go in, every no, not touch, those events, every object that is registered for that event will be called back and told about it. The other thing that we have are local events, and there each object registers for its specific callback. So touch, for instance, would be something we would register that your object wants to know when it is touched, and it will get a callback specifically when the touch happens. You also can you can tell it that it will respond to collisions, and it will do its own collision detect and send events for when collisions happen. So it's event-driven. And let's go back and talk some more about the actual development. Oh, let's go back to, so that's where we find our documentation, and so we'll be using that a fair amount. And now let's talk about actual development. And what I'm going to be doing now is actually going in to do some development. And there are going to be several different parts that we're going to be talking about. I'll start with the launch pad that I had showed you. Let's go back and talk about this. So I talked about us having a developer in 6.3 in our applications. Our main starting point is the quick launch pad. So I've actually got that also in my doc because I use it often enough, and we'll bring it up. Oh, now this is also something different. I don't know how many people of you have already started using Quick, or if this is your first time. Before 6.3.1, when you first bring up the Launchpad, it's blank. It doesn't have all of these things in it. One of the things they've done to make learning Quick a little bit easier with 6.3 is we've actually taken some of the examples that we've got, and we've already pre-populated the Launchpad with some of our examples. So we've got some things that we can start out with. Now, we're going to actually start off with just a completely brand new project. And so the way we do that is we actually go ahead and say new project, and I'm just going to call it my first app, and go ahead and tell it to create. Now, it turns out we've got a number of different things that we can do when we're in a project. So now that we're created, we have some settings that we can do, and so we can have add our publisher information. We're eventually going to be adding our BlackBerry author ID stuff here. In order to get into the store, we can add icons, and this will be used for packaging up for any of the versions. So we'll have a separate iOS bundle ID, our Android package ID, and what will happen is when we get to our deployment step, it will grab the right information to package up and make the final application. But the other interesting thing is, besides the regular settings that we can pick, we can actually drive the process here. So the normal thing is, here are the actual deployment buttons where we will send the finished products to our devices. But we normally work on the desktop. And so on the desktop, we usually work in the simulator. And we can develop on there rapidly for a nice quick turnaround. And then when we get the application working that we want, we will go ahead and use deploy. Let me go ahead and show you what I've created so far. So the important thing is, let me go back here to documents. And so you saw that we were putting it into a quick projects folder. So here's my first app. This is what we created when we said a new application. The important thing in here is within the resources folder. Here we have our main.lua. So this is the Lua script that we're going to create and be editing. So let me go ahead and drop that on my text editor. And so this is the first thing that got created when we created Lua script. We just have some little text in here. And so the very first thing we do is we just say print of this thing. So it's sort of a hello world startup point. And I just wanted to show you what happens when we actually then go to run this. So I'm going to go ahead and launch the simulator. And so there are two things that are happening. So this with the black screen is the simulator that we've launched. Now, we don't have any this is my app here. This was a print thing. Here's where that shows up. Down here we have the very bottom line, this is my app. So this is going into our trace viewer. So there are two things that get launched when we start up. It's the simulator and the trace viewer. So you see that we get lots of system messages, but also when we do the print, that is what gives us the output, our own output here. Now, when I go back into develop, I'm going to go ahead and close these for right now and do some more development. And let me go back to, I want to be on the browser. And in what we have here, we go back to our basic stuff, our APIs. And start out with a quick app in 5 minutes. So the big thing that we're going to do, I have one other thing I want to do before I actually start our developing. Going back here. Zip down and tell you what's going on here as part of the development process. So I want to give you the background of what's going on, and then we'll actually start doing some programming. But we'll know this is what's happening for us. So the important part is when we launch, Marmalade has done all of this stuff with C++ before, and we actually use all of that startup information so that we go ahead and start up and initialize the system. We can do memory management. We use OpenGL as one of our main graphics environments. So it turns out Lua will actually be driving OpenGL when we make our calls. It'll actually be making OpenGL calls. And the C++ stuff will also register the event handler. And all of the event handling will then be done natively, and the events themselves will then come to our Lua script places. So after we do the system initialization, which is normal app startup, we will then create a Lua virtual machine, and that's where the scripts will actually run in, and it will initialize the quick engine code. And this is one of the things that makes us a little bit different from if you started all by yourself, in that there are certain quick objects that we go ahead and create. So the director is the object, the Lua direct object that does all of the graphics and stuff. So we initialize the director. So it's already initialized, and you can go ahead and use director dot whatever to perform your code. So you can actually, that's part of what makes it so fast getting up and going. And then after we've initialized the quick engine, we go ahead and load the main.lua file that we'd already looked at. Now it turns out we could actually specify a different file name to start up, but main.lua is pretty much what you'll see in the world as far as Lua scripts. And so all of our examples are pretty well going to work with main.lua as where we will hold the applications code. And we can go ahead and edit the Lua code, and it talks about reloading updates. And so part of what I want to show you that is a shortcut that Ram had suggested to me. So before I get into this simple example stuff, let's go back to the Hello World stuff. So we have when we run the simulator, all those steps I just talked about will have already happened. So now let's talk about actually getting some code to do something in here. So this is talking about the Launchpad that we've already talked about. And the first thing they talk about doing is the print statement, print hello world, and that works just the way that the default text in our created project works. So I'm going to skip over that. Let's do something a little bit more interesting. This is actually showing a picture of what we've already seen. So here's another version of this. Notice I told you about director does all of the graphics things. So here's a line that says director, and then it says create label. So create label is going to create some text, and the text is going to be hello world, and it's going to do it at 0, 0. Now, one of the things to know about Lua is it uses coordinate systems as if you were working with graph paper in your geometry class. The 0, 0 is going to be at the lower left-hand corner. Sometimes numbers get higher as you do screen addressing. Higher numbers are at the bottom. but this is going to work more like we're used to from the pen and pencil days. The highest numbers are at the top and at the right. So that's going to put it at the lower left-hand corner. So let's go ahead and actually get some code here. So I'll go ahead and copy this. I'll go back into my editor. I'll go ahead and leave what's there, still there, just to know it's there. Add this. Now, I'll save it. And now, when I go ahead and launch, I'm going to bring up the same two things that we did before. But now, our director.create label has actually created our Hello World example. So there's our first thing that we've actually put on the screen. So now we're going to talk about going a little bit beyond that. So let's see where we're going. I'm going to go back to, so there's more stuff that we talk about here for getting going, but I actually have some other stuff that I've put in that I actually want to that I've used. So this is some code that was developed by Nick Smith, who's our resident development genius. Just won't go away. I don't want that here yet. Don't want that yet. So I actually want to get the code out of here. Okay, so this isn't working the way I wanted it to. I can't capture this. It's being an image. Okay. Nuts. Okay. Well, I apologize. So I should have this in text form, but I just moved everything over to this machine for our webinar, and I have left it behind. So let me see if I can actually let's actually go over here again. So I want my text edit up here. And not that. We've already talked about that. So we want, yeah, okay, there we go. We want this guy. And what we want to do is add some more code to it. So I'll tell you what, I need to get us some code. Now I'm going to kind of wing it a little bit here. Let's talk about, actually then, we'll go ahead with the with our actual tutorial. I want to do something other than this, but I just seem to be stymied. So I'll go ahead and try this. So here's what we're going to do is instead of what I had there, we're actually going to create a sprite. So let's go back here. I need I'm going to replace that there. Now, a sprite is actually an image. So the important thing here is when I go ahead and say I'm going to create this button using a sprite, which means using an image, you see it says button PNG. And it's going to display it in the center and some things like that. The important thing is we need to get some graphics, the button PNG around that we can actually use. So the important thing that I wanted to show you here is if we go back into the Finder, I've got that still here. So in my projects, we're in the resources directory. So if I don't have another path on that, it's going to want the button PNG to be here in this location. So let me go and grab those items we're going to need. So let me create another window. Let me go off to my quick stuff. So back in developer, this now, and go into the quick folder, and we have our data folder. And in data folder, we've got a number of different things. We've got a bunch of things that we can use. And so, for instance, one of the guys is here, button PNG. I'll go ahead and drag the Option key so that I can actually make a copy of him. And I'll drop him in there. So I've got that. So that will let this button be created and center it. So let's go back to our pad and into. So if I go ahead, so now I go ahead and I made a change. I should save this. So now if I want to actually do something here again, I could go ahead and say launch again. Actually, for this purpose, I'm going to go ahead and do that. So it's built our button here. But I wanted to show you something special about this. So we did a button, but let's actually take a look at this. So we've still only got one trace view that's getting all the output. But look, we've actually got two simulators running. So this one is the old Hello World one that we did, is still hanging around. And then we have the new one that we've done. So we usually don't go back and just say test without closing these guys. But here, let me show you how we can do a shortcut here. So the idea is if we've gone ahead and added new code up here, and this is our old world, one of our options that we have is to actually do a refresh. So if I do Command R, so if I do Command R, it will do the update, and we are still using exactly the same simulator that we were doing before. And so it's a nice, easy way to not be confused as what's going on. I actually have had times when, because I did a new launch, I was going, why didn't anything change? Because I was looking at the old one. So doing the Command R on the Mac, and of course Control R on Windows, is a nice little touch for going ahead and getting your development to stay in the same world. There is one extra thing that Nick had wanted me to remind you of, and that is, as you keep going along and we keep doing the refresh, and it keeps doing the graphics, underneath the world, the script, the script of the virtual machine has been taking care of all of the previous things that have happened too, and it may not be completely, it may not have cleaned up all of the memory that we might have wanted to at some point. So every once in a while, we're actually going to use a Command T, which will actually shut down the simulator and then relaunch it. And if things are acting a little funky when you're doing your Command R's for refresh, go ahead and do the Command T, because it'll launch a new VM and do the cleanup. Excuse me. And so that's a nice little touch to know as the first thing in making sure that things are working the way that you thought they were. Now, the other thing I wanted to do is, I told you that this is a object-oriented world. So let's go back here and do some object-oriented stuff. So this next thing that's talking about is this function. So here's a function, and we won't actually execute the function. It'll be just kind of cached as a function that can be called. And then, since we've already created the button up here, we'll go ahead and add an event listener to the button. And that will be this button method, or this button function, will be registered for our button event or our button object for a touch event. So that's what this is going to do. So we'll go ahead and add that. Let's go back here. Do a save. Now, I haven't re-executed. Let's see. Okay, so all I did was save and then the Command R, and since what it does is it relaunches the script, we didn't have to say compile or whatever. It went and got the latest script. So it did. We are now responding to that button, and you notice it knows when we're there. And just to prove there's nothing, well, okay. So that's how we do an event handler, that we go ahead and create the function and then map the function to go with the event. Yeah. Let's see how we're doing time-wise. Okay, so okay, so you want to remove the project from the recent list. Cancel. Don't do that. So we've got some graphics started here. I'd actually want to go on and do more work with actually doing more development, but let me tell you where to get some information on this. Let's go back to our world here. Let me do another tab. New tab. Let's go back to the same place and go back to, oh. And what I want to do is go on to our API stuff. To our guides, to our guides, to our guides. Okay. Let's go back up here. Okay, so part of what I want to do is actually get into our documentation that shows us the techniques that we can actually apply to our objects. There. Let's see if this, okay, this is where I want to go. Okay, so I want to talk about this a little bit more. So we'd actually talked about the director. So the director does graphics that we had just seen, stuff like that. We actually have the physics engine that uses the box 2D stuff, and again, that would be physics dot the calls, and we can actually have and system is the part that actually has system level callbacks, and so that's the other thing. So system is also created at the same time that director is. So we can go ahead and say system dot of the calls, and these guys are all created on startup for us, which is nice and neat. And then from the libraries, we can talk about the objects. And so the real important objects to talk about, we've already seen that we were using director as an object, and the background of all the graphics will go into the scene. We will have text will be labels. An atlas is a way to go ahead and map graphics. We can do tiles, and so your sprites can then go into an atlas, and your sprites are your individual graphics that can then be animated. And we also have, oh, here's an important thing too. When we're building up graphics, we have some primitives. So we have lines and circles, and you can actually have a path that you can create. But when you want to create more detailed things, you actually build up an object which has nodes. And so you can add circles onto other circles or onto other paths, and you create more depth. You can do a car where you have the where you joined two circles, which are the wheels. You can animate the wheels separately because they're handled separately, but still by being connected with the nodes, it means you can then move the entire car object, and the wheels in the car all go together. So node is how we put together objects to make them more detailed, more flexible, stuff like that. And go off to the events, the sort of events that we can get. We've already talked about having being able to do touch. That was the one that we'd already done. We can know about stopping and starting with suspend. We can actually know when the exit is happening and do cleanup. And so those would be system level things that we would register for. Let's see, and then collision. Collision is an interesting thing I told about. Here, I didn't actually talk about this. So we have objects, we have methods. The other things that we have for Lua is properties. So each of those objects have already known properties. So you can go ahead and change the color. And in fact, let's actually go back and look at the text of what we've got so far. What happens is, so we got the touch event comes into the function, and we get basically key up and key down. And so in this case, what we call key down would be an event of for a button would be phase begin is key down. And then what happens is we can actually have RG&B, or just RG&B, but we do this set color to the RGB values. And the big thing is color. In this case, we're talking about self. So self is talking about the button because we're being processed on a button. So this means the button's color is being set to RGB. And so that's a property. And so the big thing that we do is we just go ahead and set the properties. We don't have to do as in OpenGL where you have to actually then set everything and do a show. Our function just did the set, and as soon as we have a change, the Lua knows to go ahead and update the display and reflect the new properties and things like that. So that's a real key difference in the way Lua works as opposed to other things, and part of what makes it really, really fast. You'll see when we go into the debugger, we can actually go ahead and change values on the fly, and they will just be used. So it's a pretty nice way of dealing with things. So this is just an intro. I had actually wanted to go ahead and put an entire application for you guys to do. I'm A, running out of time, and B, I don't have it really nice and handy. So I feel like I owe you guys more. I owe you guys an entire application. Nick actually has some nice code to do this, and I just don't have it with me right now. So I'm going to say I've given you a peek under the hood. Let's continue on and talk about the other features of Lua. And as a developer relations engineer, I will have to put out some very nice sample code for you guys. But I think you see approximately how the process works. I'm hoping you got that clear. So let's go back to, so these were functions that I was going to go ahead and actually show you in use. So let me just talk about this before I go on. Again, here's another example of doing responding to touch, but it's a system events thing. But we're going to add one other thing where we're going to do this collision detection stuff on it. So we created a sprite, which is a ball, and we've added, so here we're calling physics. I told you that the physics was already predefined. So we go ahead and add a node to whatever we were touching. We're going to create this ball where we touched, and then we'll add an event lister for collision for that type of thing. And the listener will use this body collision thing. So here's what's important here. So this we will touch, we will create a ball. We will add the listener to the ball, and now this function will also be registered by the event listener, and what will happen is it will now detect collisions, and now when it gets collisions, which will come in with the begin, we'll go ahead and change the sprite to this cross thing. So you can see what we're doing is we create one listener for creating, one listener for responding. We didn't actually have any other connection between the two things, but this will be a very dynamic thing. We will actually be touching the screen and watching things get created, watching them interact with each other. and the tweening will do the animation as the balls will move back and forth from being a cross to a ball and stuff like that. So it's really rich, and it's really flexible. So this is basically, nope, come back. So this is the graphics. Had I been able to cut and paste this guy, we would have this graphics where we would have spawned these balls, and where the collision would happen, it will actually then do the X's. So this is sort of actually, you can use it almost for like debugging, but it's really easy to add effects like that. And so I've already done the demo that I had meant to do, or it would have been more. Just a moment. Yeah, things. People are joining. Okay. I thought I'd heard something on Skype. I thought we had a question, but in fact, this is a really good place to just ask people. I think I've been just sort of waving my hands here. This would be a good place if you've got questions so far. We can let you kind of start. Remind you that we've got the ability to go ahead and talk or answer questions as we're on the fly too. So let's go on. So one of the other things I really wanted to stress about Quick is that we actually use open source components. One of the most important things about open source components is when you have sources that come from different places, making them work together. This is just happening. Oh, just a moment while I look in and see. I've got messages all over here. Okay, can you give a quick, so we have a question, so that's why I was responding or going over here. Can you give a quick explanation of what a compiler is and what GCC is? Oh, okay, so that's, I'm thinking that question is coming to sort of compare and contrast. So the big thing about a compiler is we would do a separate compilation step, which would then take your sources and make a binary. And then what happens is the binary gets executed later on by your processor and does your graphics. And the other question about this thing is it's talking about GCC. So GCC is the set of compilers that are provided by the, I want to say the Free Software Foundation, but it's a set of compilers for, it has a whole set of different languages they support, a whole set of different back ends that they support to compile for ARM or x86 or MIPS or things like that. And so the compiler is really, really flexible and builds, because it builds native code, it builds really, really fast code. Now, the important thing to know about compilers versus what we're doing here with the simulator is that we do not compile our code. The source code is right there in your bar file. That text file that we were typing is the code that will be in your bar file. And when we launch it at launch time, at runtime, the interpreter will then read that code and execute it at that time. So it's a little bit slower because it has to interpret rather than execute, but it's really, really fast for development because you don't have to do the separate compile step. So I'm hoping that answers what the person had the question about. So I'm going to head back to talking about open source components. And actually the open source components, one of the things about them is, notice we talked about this open quick, but it has C++ source code. So all the code that we're executing, you know, go back. We actually told our script to do individual things, like create a sprite or set a color. So we were actually doing actions. So this gets interpreted on the fly. The actual setting of the colors, the actual doing the rendering and drawing is actually done by C++ code underneath. So we've got the libraries. We've got the Cocos 2D libraries. We've got the OpenGL libraries. And so they're executing really rapidly. And that's because the actual functionality that responds to our script is C++. So when you go back here to talking about our open source components, the extensions that we can do, the frameworks themselves are in C++ code, and it integrates our Vox2D, our Cocos2D, all integrate, and we can get other C++ libraries out there that are available. And that's one of the really great powers of C++ is, well, C is sort of the lingua franca of computers. Almost everything can link into a C library one way or another. And C++ is just the object-oriented, well, it's a little bit simplification, is the object-oriented version of C, but it's the version that other things can link to. And we actually make those sources available. So we have a GitHub location where you can actually, if you want to play with Quick and do things that we don't yet support, you have the freedom to go in and get the sources and make changes that are really, really fundamental. So it's really, really powerful. And then the open source Lua wrappings are, and the additional APIs are then, as we've seen, really super easy to use at high level. So that's the way they work together. And let's see, when we're talking about compiling platform-specific projects, one of the important things about doing C++ is it's going to want to link against native libraries. So when we actually do our deploy, if we're going to BlackBerry, we'll actually be linking to BlackBerry routines, whereas on iOS we'll be doing NS, next step calls. And all that will be resolved by the linker, and it will be platform specific. So one of the things you can do with our GitHub sources is you can also build portions of your code that will work with platform specific code, which is not something you do up in the scripting level. So we have a lot of flexibility. Okay. And also as part of using our own dog food, we actually have added some things. So you will actually find that we've got support for the accelerator or location-based information, which would not be part of Lua normally, but they're so useful in doing mobile phone-based applications that we've provided the hooks to actually get you into them. We've given you Launchpad as a nice way to manage your projects and do the one-click deploying that we were talking about and debugging. So that's something that Quick adds that you don't get with just the open source stuff. And we also have, we're talking about our robust internals. One of the really important things that we do is because we put all the parts together, we make sure they play together fine. And we do a lot of work with the GPU as a way to make sure that the graphics is really well accelerated. So we think when we put together our Quick package, there are some real reasons for using Quick as opposed to just using Lua on your own. We've really done some value added here. We also have, so I said we can go ahead and add things. It turns out there are other people out there in the world that have done useful functions already. People doing ads and stuff like that. And yes, you could port something like that or write something like that, but what you really want to do is find the services that already are working and populated with those ads and things like that. So what we do is we made our extension manager available, our EDK, our extension development kit, available to these other companies, and they've made libraries of their services that work with our languages. And we want to say that this is true of Lua also, that we have a number of companies that we can do analytics with Flurry or advertising. We can add it in very easy because we've got support for them. So that's another plus that we've got. And of course, I've already talked about the extensions kit because that lets you do even more things than are available. We've got that. So it's really, really flexible. So this slide is just talking about Marmalade with our main Marmalade functionality plus the extensions really becomes a very flexible development package. Okay. Just a moment, let me skip ahead. So I've talked about developing. You know what I didn't do, though? I didn't talk about actual deploying. This is important. So we've developed our app. It's going to be much nicer than this, of course. Let's tell him to go away and tell the trace viewer to go away. One of the other things that we can do that's really, really important is go ahead and deploy. So the important thing that we would do is we've developed our application, you saw that. We would go ahead and do our BlackBerry deploy. So again, as part of my just moving, so I have a development machine where everything's working on, and this is my communications machine that has our connection, and it's also a cleaner world. It doesn't have all the other things I'm doing. So I haven't gotten everything over here onto the communications machine that I would like to. But let me go ahead and see what happens if I do this. So I was afraid of that. So I don't have everything working. But the idea would be that we would hit deploy, and in the settings what we would do, oh, well, here's the other thing, is I don't have my author ID here. We would actually go into the author ID. Let me see if I can do that for you. That's an important thing to be able to do. Let's go back to the Finder and go back to developer and not developer, into libraries. I have to go back here to it. Top level. Libraries, RIM, motion R. And we have the author ID, and it's a plist thing. Ram, you're still with us? Ram? Well, the important thing is.
Yep, I am. Sorry, I was
oh.
Yeah.
Okay, so make sure I'm telling them right here. So I can actually treat the author P12 as a text file, I think, and actually get the author ID out of the P12 file, right? For putting in our BlackBerry author ID.
BlackBerry author ID is yeah. I mean, I think you should try opening it. I've never done that in just by editing or opening the file, but
okay. So if I try opening it with just do a text file, see what happens.
This ID is something that you should get it when you filled in the form, like you know the signing form that you filled in. So
okay.
yeah, I mean that's where you'll find the information. Like
okay, so the author ID will be in our reply that we got from BlackBerry when we asked for our tokens. That's what you're saying, right?
Yeah, when you fill up the form, you actually fill in the information. So that's where.
Right. Okay. Okay. So we would have to have that and have that here, and then when it packages up, we actually use the author ID and the icons. That when we actually do our deploy, wait, not publish. When we do our deploy, that would do the packaging up portion. And the idea would be when I would hit deploy, I would get a bar file out the other end, and then we could go on to publish, and now, whoa, we just lost somebody. And the idea is we can now go ahead and publish for these applications, or for the stores. And so that would be how we would use the rest of our Marmalade Launchpad. And I apologize.
Yeah.
Yes?
Yeah, just a quick tip is that another way, if you completely forgot about the information, what you can do is you can generate the debug tokens using the keys. It could be using a command line or even the BlackBerry SDK tools. And once you have the debug tokens, inside there's like the information file from which you can get the information. So yeah, that's just another workaround in case you forgot.
Okay, okay, yeah, so that's important. Okay, so the theory is we would have already been able to deploy and finish off our project. But what I actually want to talk about after that, which was not very done well, is that we actually want to talk about debugging. And we've got a brand new way of doing debugging using the Zero Brain debugger. So the Zero Brain debugger is actually an application. It's a third-party application. Let me stay back there. That you would normally, if you're doing Lua development, and so you can use other systems to do Lua development, and then go ahead and buy the Zero Brain debugger to use with them. One of the really neat things that we've done is when I go ahead and look at our applications here, Zero Brain Studio is now part of our installation. So we have the debugger now that you can use directly without going ahead and buying it. It's already built in for you to be able to use. So the important thing that happens is in our script file, we would add one extra line which says requires, so Zero Brain actually requires some library code for support for doing the debugging. So we would add to our script file a line that says it requires the support files to be there, and then we don't do anything else. We program as normal, and when we want to actually do debugging, the debugger is a separate IDE. So we would then launch the Zero Brain Studio and go ahead and bring our Lua script into the Zero Brain Studio, and we can go ahead and set breakpoints and things like that. And I have something I want to show us to that regard. So if I say, let's go here. And so this is the regular Zero Brain location. And we actually have a demo here that I would like to show of it working.
Hello, my name is Paul Kulchenko, and this video is a demonstration of Marmalade quick integration and debugging support in the Zero Brain Studio development environment for Lua. This is how it works. I will use one of the samples that come with Marmalade Quick, and you can see this list of samples here. And we'll use something like Hello World. We open main.lua file from that project, and then we'll set it as the current project. And we can do this by going to either project directory set from current file or by using this button in the toolbar. The second thing that we need to do is to switch the current interpreter to use Marmalade Quick. And now we can run our project. As you can see, the project is quite simple. It has a couple of messages and a button that we can click, and it will change its color when we click it. So let's do something a bit more interesting. Let's debug this application. And we need to add this line or uncomment it, and this will enable debugging integration.
I was just talking about we had to add a line in order to do the debugging. That right there, the require mob debug start, is the line that we have to add. And as you saw, he just uncommented it out. Okay, keep going.
I also put a breakpoint here to stop when we start debugging. Now we can go to start debugging. And you'll see the application is suspended here. We can now step through the code, and you can see that the message that you printed actually appears in the output window. And you can also see that the program was started you can see the command that was used to start the simulator, which may be useful for troubleshooting. You can now step through the code. You can also mouse over a variable and you'll see its value, current value that the debugger reports. And let's say we want to stop when we click on that button in the application. Put a breakpoint here. This is part of the touch event, and it checks if the phase is again, and we continue the application. Let's move the window here. So now when we click on it, you can see the application is suspended here. We can step through the code. We can inspect the values, RGB. We can also open the stack window. It'll show all the stack frames, and we can see that the current function has these local variables. Indeed, we can see RGB values. We can see the event table. You can expand it to see values in the table. But let's do something a bit more interesting. If you go to remote console, we can run any log commands we want, and they will be executed in our application. So for example, we can look at RGB values, but we can also change them. Let's make the color red instead of being somewhat green and blue. And you can see that the values have been also changed in the stack window. And now if we, let's close the stack window, if we continue the application, we can see that the button is indeed red. Click it again and execute. We can see that there are different values now, and let's change them to get green color. We continue the execution, and the color is indeed green. So this integration gives you an easy way to run your program, suspend it if you need it, inspect the values, modify them, and then continue the execution. When you're done debugging your application, you can simply close it. Go to Zero Brain Studio project page and give it a try. Thank you.
Okay, so as I say, that's something that was just added, and here's a really important thing too. This was just added to Quick, and one of the important things to know about this version of Quick, you must use the 6.3.1 SDK with the new version of Quick for all of this to work. So we want the complete package, the newest SDK as well as the newest Quick. And like I say, there's a lot of stuff in there. I wanted to mention, as long as we're talking about new stuff.
Hello, my name is Paul Kuchenko, and this video is a demonstration of Marmalade Quick integration and debugging support.
Okay. So besides adding the debugger, one thing else that we've done is, as long as you're doing debugging, there are also support issues. And one of the big things about support in most of our levels that we're talking about in the indie level is we use our forums, our Q&A forum to get to go ahead and post questions, and then to have the community post answers back. I want to mention that one of the things that Marmalade has done that started at the beginning of this year to try and help our support is that we've asked all of our internal developers that to use 20% of the time, 1 day a week, to go ahead and look at Q&A and answer the questions. So we're trying to have our own answers be provided for the Q&A, but it really turns out a big chunk of what does get answered are from the people like you who answer things for other developers. And so the Q&A has been our location for doing that. But as of today, we actually have a new version for doing that. Our new developer.marmalade location just went online just today. Let's see. So it went live today. It's designed to really tie together our assets. One of the things it really does is it makes searching a lot easier, as I understand. And so I think you're going to like it. Let's go ahead and actually go up here and show it. And of course, I just closed the browser. Let's open it up again and go to, not there, up here. Okay. And so there's our brand new developer page. So it has ways to go ahead and get our downloads fairly easy. We break things up into, so before we had to go to a lot of different places. You'd click here and click there to see what you could do. Notice how we've got everything is at the top level, really easy to find. So we've got tutorials here. We've got other resources besides just what we download. Oh, there is a book about developing with Marmalade. Of course, that's the C++ Marmalade. And then we've got the other downloads and documentation that we can get to from here. Our third-party APIs, we have a nice direct way of going and finding them so you don't have to discover them on your own. And then at the very bottom, this is where we get to actually asking the questions. We have our facts that we've been working on. And then we have our knowledge base and our community answers. So here's where we're going to ask the questions and get the answers. And as I say, you don't have to go to some other thing. It's launched all off this one place. I think it's going to make our developer support be a little bit more useful to you guys. And that's another one of the big pluses that we've got today. Okay, so 10:30. So I'm about on schedule. So the idea had been that we would allow about a half an hour for questions and answers. Our marketing people wanted us, after I've talked about Quick itself, wanted us to make sure to remind everyone before we go into Q&A about the BlackBerry offer. Just once again, I mean, that's the part of why we're doing the webinar, is that we are having our special program where BlackBerry and Marmalade, if you are developing for BlackBerry 10 and can get something of at least beta quality in by the end of this month, we will extend your Marmalade SDK Indie license for a year. So that's really cool. And we will also then sign you up for a chance to win a free Z10. And so the idea was, get the Marmalade SDK. I hope that I've given you enough of a hint to do that, to get you started. We talked about Quick today because we think it's a really fast way of doing development. But you can use any of our products, either the C++ main SDK version, excuse me, or the web Marmalade. However you develop an application and submit it to the BlackBerry store is a valid thing for you to do. One of the nice things about Marmalade is that we give you these different languages to use, and there's no extra charge for them. You can kind of pick the language that you want to develop in and use it. And the fact that we used all the different pieces to help develop each other, such as the simulator, knowing what we have to do to deploy applications and stuff like that, just means that they can coexist rather nicely, so we can go ahead and do the C++ extensions and they will work together. We think it's a nice family of languages and tools, and whichever ones you use, if you can get something put together by the end of the month and submit it, that will be enough to go ahead and extend your license, your Indie level license. And also, if you haven't, we've had previous options to get BlackBerry devices. And so if you've previously gotten a BlackBerry device, the drawing is not available to you. This is for new developers. and we only have 10 of them. And so what will happen is by getting your application submitted to the BlackBerry store, you will be able to be entered into the drawing, and it's one entry per developer. It doesn't matter how many apps you've done, and we will then do the drawing. We will notify the winners, and they'll have 7 days to respond, and if they haven't, we'll go down to the next one on the list, 7 working days. And we hope that's enough of an incentive to get you doing things on BlackBerry 10. Any questions? Okay, so let's see. So we have moderators. I hear typing going on.
Oh, that would be me.
Oh, okay. Okay. So right now I'm counting on the questions going off to our moderator, to Lester and to Kevin, and if they can't answer things, they can pass them on to us. In absence of having other questions coming right in, there were a number of issues that I sort of noted that I was going to bring up and remind people of. I kind of perused our current Q&A and gotten some questions. One of the first I think I've already re-emphasized is that we must be on 6.3 to use the SDK 6.3 to use the latest quick features. We've had questions on graphics performance, and this is something that I really wanted to emphasize about Marmalade. Marmalade has got people that really graphics is their forte, and they know things like how to talk to GPUs and stuff like that. So we've got, for instance, part of our development that we do on one of those other platforms that happens to use DirectX, we, Marmalade, are able to use OpenGL because that's our main development environment. Most of the devices that we talk to, including BlackBerry, use OpenGL, and so that's pretty much the native way our developers know to do graphics. So even on those other devices, we can take the OpenGL atoms and put them together and call into the GPU. So we do graphics-assisted graphics, or excuse me, GPU-assisted graphics on all of the platforms that we've developed for. And so that's one of the strengths of Marmalade. And it's true here in the BlackBerry world also. Let's see. Okay. We've had questions about licensing issues. So, when I've done BlackBerry portathons, I've done several portathons now. Some of the main questions we had were trying to use our development environment. We ran into licensing issues, and we got these in the question because one of the portathons happened just when we were moving locations and our license server was down for just a short while. But it brought up something that I thought I would mention to everyone. The way our development environment works is when it starts up, it checks to see if you have a valid license. If you're not connected to the internet or our licensing server is down, it does default, it gives you the benefit of the doubt. It will go ahead and run anyway. But that's only true for about 10 days. So if you haven't been on the internet and been connected to our server, to our licensing server, what will happen is that 11th day when you try to start up with no connection, it'll come back and say it will not let our development environment run. So just wanted to emphasize, make sure you're using our environment while you're on the internet on a regular basis, just to make sure your license is considered valid. And so the interesting thing is, it was like non-quick items were like the biggest support issue that I had while I was on our portathons. Okay, let's see. Okay, any questions at all? We've got lots of time. Are people still hanging on? Are they listening to us?
Keithen, I actually sent you a private message. I'm not able to send it out to all. So there's like the BlackBerry FAQs.
Yes.
It has most of these frequently asked questions. It's a pretty good collection of questions.
Oh,
if you can show them over the website, that would be
guys,
easy.
I really have to apologize. I've been looking over here at Skype where questions come in, and it would help if I actually scrolled down to see that there were more questions. So let's see. Ram just mentioned. Let's see if we've got something from Ram. Okay, so I haven't seen your statement. Could you just say it again one more time? So you typed it on what should have been the webinar control panel, Ram?
Yeah, it's in the webinar, GoWebinar private chat.
Oh.
I just sent you a link which you can share to the audience.
Okay. Okay. Chat. Ah. Oh. Oh. Okay. So
our easiest would be if you can just Google search Marmalade BlackBerry FAQs. It will actually show up in the first link.
Okay. So yeah. So I have to apologize here because there's a whole pile of things on chat that I hadn't seen too. So I see that some of these things do say to all, and as Ram said, your post was to me privately. Okay. Okay.
Yeah, if you can, just open that one.
Okay. I've got a whole bunch of information to share with you guys, it turns out. So let's see. So here's Ram's quote. Let me copy it. It didn't let me actually copy from here. There's another page here. Let me actually go over to where I've got the text edit thing. So I'm going back and doing things old school here. So we have so Ram is actually okay. So now I'm getting a message from going to meeting, and it's not letting me do stuff because someplace I have a going to meeting alert someplace. Where would that be? Oh. Okay. Well, I'm having trouble running go to meeting. So, not there. Not there. Okay, so I'm just getting beeping happening. Well, nuts. Okay, so in my chat, I can't even do something with my chat right now. And Nick has given me good information that's on the chat thing that I can't find either. So I apologize for this.
Keithen, this is Lester here. Just to remind you, you've got some questions in the Skype chat.
Yeah. So I was trying to add. So I've got questions in two separate places. So I've got some on the private chat, which including Nick has given me some real good answers that I wanted to talk about for the keys that where I was fumbling over. So I'd want to get that. And of course, right now the webinar thing somehow is locked up and not letting me affect the control panel. So while that's happening, you guys can still hear me. So let me go over to the questions on Skype, and let me go ahead and address some of them. So let's start here. Questions to answer, compilers. Okay, how do I open the Quick Launchpad? Okay, so the big thing about the Quick Launchpad is it's in the within the SDK, the applications. The Quick Launchpad will be an exe in applications, and so you just launch it from there. So the important thing to do is make a shortcut on Windows, or add it to your dock on the Mac and launch it with a shortcut. But it's the application there that we use. How do I build and deploy my application to BlackBerry devices? Now that's a part I've kind of stumbled over. The important thing is we really have to make sure that we've got our settings correct. And as I say, Nick has given me some really good information I can't get at right now. But we need our flag set correctly, and we need the BlackBerry link set up. I think we need that. And hit the deploy button and have the packaging happen. So I kind of did the steps, I sort of pantomimed them. We didn't actually see it happen and working. But the idea is from the Launchpad in the same screen, let's go back to, no, I can't get my screen to come forward. Okay, so yeah, I've done something on my machine. So the important thing is after we fired up a project, we had the test button. Let's see if I have the Launchpad over here someplace. We had the test button, and then under the test screen, there we go, here we go. So the important thing for deploying is after we've got it working in the simulator to just hit the deploy button, and then it takes the information that we had in settings and packages them up, and will then actually build a file that can then be downloaded onto the devices. And we have different drivers for working for each of the different sorts of platforms that we talk to. For iOS, we actually make a package that goes through iTunes, and iTunes does the installation for us. But for the other platforms, Windows, BlackBerry, and Android, we deploy directly to the devices. Let's see. Save questions. Making a list. Okay. What is the difference between Marmalade C++, Web Marmalade, and Marmalade Quick? So it turns out the underlying implementation, we use a lot of the C++ libraries for them. So the main distinction is that they're going to be written in different languages. So Web Marmalade, of course, would be JavaScript and CSS, and will work as in a web view. And so we will launch the web view and get that kicked off. The Quick that we were just talking about launches a Lua virtual machine and then interprets your Lua script, and it does all the things it needs to do to set up the application. And C++ is the one where you go back to being closest to native, and you're going to compile and do things. And the C++ winds up being the most flexible, including being able to do platform-specific calls. So it's mainly the development language that you want to work with, and we've set up our tools, mainly our launch pads, for both Web Marmalade and Marmalade Quick. We have launch pads like we were just showing that makes your projects, so it's only looking at Quick projects, only looking at Web Marmalade projects, so it makes it a lot easier to sort of administer them and take care of them and launch them. So that's one of the differences. Why should use this engineering framework instead of Unity 3D construction environment? Well, there's a lot of people that feel that. So the big thing about Unity Unity is a really nice WYSIWYG thing. So you have your objects, your graphical objects. You can click on them, assign scripts and stuff like that. And for artists, it's really, really a very flexible, nice way of doing things. And Unity is a tremendously successful company. When it comes down to you want to do something that's out that maybe needs a special service that Unity is not yet implemented, if you want to do something of your own, because we're more programmer-centric, I think we really win in the flexibility sort of viewpoint. So the big thing is take a look at how your people work. If you're already C++ developers and you know C++, or if you already know JavaScript, you might want to stay in the languages that you're familiar with. But I think it's one of the things you do is if you run into a roadblock in other places and you know that we have the flexibility to be able to get you over that hump, I think that's really one of our strengths when comparing to like Unity. And what does the IDE editor would you recommend? Oh, okay. With auto-completion for quick. Windows with auto-completion. Well, so, and of course he said specifically Windows, and actually there is a bit of a question there in Windows. On the Mac, we pretty much go with Xcode, so there aren't many choices. It turns out that on Windows, of course, our default IDE is Visual Studio, and most people that's what is their preference. But we do allow flexibility to let you choose other ones. Now, as far as code completion for quick, I would actually have to do some research on that. I'm not for sure. I don't have a good answer for you there, but very definitely an IDE doing code completion for you is really a cool thing to do. And so normally, I'd say Visual Studio would probably do it as well as anyone else, but that's just a quick answer, and it may not be definitive. You should just add physics to the ball with apparently no effort at all. Oh, and it says, is this simple and quick? And actually, yes, that is really, really important about the physics. So when we were talking about, we already have instantiated the director, and you can do graphics. Physics is also really easily, has also been instantiated. So you can make the physics calls. We were doing that in, let's see if I can get back there, in our C++ example. Let me go back to escape. In this code here, bring it to full screen. So here, when we're talking about physics, let's see. Here where we've done the physics add a node with a radius and stuff like that, we can actually add behaviors, just single lines like this. So the physics coming from box 2D is very easy to add. It's just a single line, and we've got a whole library of calls that supports. And yes, so it is very simple to add physics in quick. Would you please tell me how to set the environment variable for Marmalade, as I haven't done that before? Oh, okay. So there are several different environment variables. So if you want to actually, we have different versions of our SDK. They normally start off as 6.2 or 6.3. And so we have a variable that says where the root of your SDK is, and that's what determines whether you're using 6.3 or 6.2. And let's see, is Kevin actually replied to that one? So that variable is something that we actually maintain programmatically fairly well, and we actually have a program within our, let's go back over here to our, so this is looking at our SDK, and we actually have a program in here which is not the deploy tool, the config. SE our config tool. If nothing else, if it's not here, I know that if we actually go down into the S3E stuff, close that, go into S3E and into our bin directory, we actually have this thing called S3E config, which is actually a Python script. So you can actually navigate to so if I had various different versions, so I've got a 6.3, if I had a 6.2 installed, each one of them internally would have an S3E bin with a S3E config script in it. What you would do is go to the version of our tools that you want to use and run the S3E config tool in there. And what that will do is that should update the our system environment variables that work with our tools. And you can use that to move back and forth, as I say, if you've got different installations of Marmalade. And that'll talk about the SDK. So it'll be true. So if you set that, it'll be true for the quick that works in that version, as opposed to you know. So you'll pick your tools based on the actual SDK level, and configure it for that, and it'll work for all the languages. I'm trying to upload my draft app, and I see two options in the BlackBerry vendor portal: the batch import files and the add file bundle. Which one should I use? The BlackBerry. Ram, does that make any sense to you, or should I repeat it?
Could you please repeat the question?
Yep, I thought you would. Okay, so here's the question. So it may be our tool question, but I thought maybe if you recognize it. I'm trying to upload my draft app, and so I'm assuming we're talking to the store now. And I see two options in the BlackBerry vendor portal: the batch import files and the add file bundle. Which one should I use?
You should just use, like, if you're targeting just like a one device, then you should just use the file bundle, and then point to the location where the bar file is. Add file bundle should do the trick.
Okay. Okay. Thanks.
Keithen, you have time for one more question, I think.
I'm sorry. Okay. Well. Okay. Let's see.
So how about number 18? That's probably more relevant to most people.
Okay. I cannot run even a simple quick sample to BlackBerry or Windows Phone 8. The checkboxes are disabled. Oh. Oh boy. That would actually take some actual real-life debugging. So here's the thing that I do when I have a question about I don't have things quite working, is I sort of go back to first principles. And in fact, well, that's what got me into trouble now. On my main development box, I've got too many different things running that they interfere with each other and stuff like that. So I was putting a brand new, clean development onto my communications box, which was then also going to make it easy to display all this stuff for you. So the thing I did is I had started over from scratch, where I did a brand new clean SDK install, and then I did a brand new quick install on top of it, so that I couldn't have anything else interfering. And there are a number of times when that has really made a difference to me. So it's kind of like my first step. Now, if you've already done that and it didn't work, let's see, I cannot even run a simple quick sample in BlackBerry. I guess one of the other things I could do is, first of all, I would check out if it's an SDK thing. you could try a C++ sample just to, and so the nice thing about the SDK running is we use a lot of the same tools in that. So if you want to see if it's a quick thing or an SDK thing, you could just try doing a really basic hello world C++ example. Just see if the SDK is working. And if that's working, and then we get on to there's an issue. And so I'm believing what's going on is the BlackBerry or WP8 checkboxes we're actually talking about for the deploy mode. So usually when I see the checkboxes in deploy mode, that will be on the main SDK, because you notice in this world here where I've got the launchpad, if I'm doing quick, the part where I'd actually do the deploy is actually a deploy button, so I won't have checkboxes. Yeah, so that's usually an SDK issue, if I understand it right. So here's what I'd really like you to do. If you're having problems, go ahead and go to our web portal, post the question in our forum, and I'm even willing to go an extra step further. Let me type one thing here for you. So we want you to have someone answering your question. All I want to do is put my address here. Oh, my address is showing as part of the our login stuff, right? So I'm willing to make a commitment that if you're having issues, well, first of all, post to the forum. That's always the first step. But go ahead and copy me that you've done it, and I will make sure you get an answer, and we will, as I say, we may have to dig into it, but we will try to do that. Okay. And again, for the other questions that I missed and had not answered, ask them on our forums, and we are really trying to do a much better job at getting back and answering you. And I've been really guilty about not doing it as well as I should. I will really make a commitment to try to help you guys out. I think I owe it to you guys, so yes, post to the forum, copy me on an email if you find my address here. Okay.
Okay, thank you very much, Keithen and Ram. I hope everyone got something out of the webinar. And on behalf of Marmalade and BlackBerry, we hope to see your applications published soon. Thanks again.